that they can stay safe and obviously so that they can keep business running, right? We're a small business. We understand the needs of small businesses, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to give some information and help everyone face these challenging times. So in a little bit, just a little bit about the company. TSC Training Academy has been a DOB approved training provider in New York City for a little over 20 years. We've been primarily based out of Long Island City, and in 2018 we expanded into the Bronx. We have a training facility in the South Bronx. We're easily accessible by the 2, 4, and 5 lines. And, we are proud members of the Bronx Chamber as well. So without further ado, I am going to hand it over to my colleagues, Leo DePablos, who will be the next person you will hear. He's our senior technical instructor, as well as David Dietrich, who's our lead instructor at TSC Training Academy. And as you know, we're here to answer questions. So yeah, Leo, take it away.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me. It's quite a pleasure to be here with you guys. My colleague and I will begin focusing on 2 major topics that are going to be primarily a point of importance here when winter fastly approaches the city of New York. I'm going to be taking care of, moving forward, what are some of the key protocols a restaurant or storefront may follow as they may explore potentially expanding their business to the sidewalk or actual street of New York City. I have a quick presentation I'd like to share with you guys, and we're going to go step by step of how did we get here, what do we need to know moving forward, and any resources you guys may need or like, feel free to always ask a question, and we're going to be addressing these questions at the end of the segment. So may I please have a second? I'd like to share my presentation with you guys. So let's talk about winter. What does this really mean for a business that decides to now moving forward potentially? I know some of the news that's coming out. It's preliminary, but it's looking quite grim for a restaurant industry that took a massive beating from March all the way to July. Now, as the industry is starting to finally see some relief, here we go with another unfortunate spike of cases of COVID in our city. So what does this really mean? How do we move forward? Now, I wasn't really thinking about potentially as a restaurant going into a sidewalk or street, but now I may have to due to the difficulties of what some of the challenges we're going to be facing. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be walking you through some of the regulations that have led us to this point, and some of the resources you guys can utilize moving forward so you know exactly what the expectation is going to become as it pertains to your business, okay? Give me a quick second. I just have a message here. Now let's talk about winter. Let's talk about workplace protocols. I'll be taking care of potentially, if you do decide to exercise the city options for street dining and street bars, what am I looking for? How do I apply? So we're gonna briefly walk you through the process and what's currently happening in the city of New York. A lot of the restaurants and businesses are not being compliant, and there's a lot of resources and time and investments you guys are making and having storefronts that really don't comply with the DOT requirements, and you're getting as short as 24 hours to comply, or you have to close your business down, which is quite the gruesome hit to take during these times. So let's walk you through what you need to know. In detail, I'm gonna walk you through the requirements of, okay, so now we're approaching, what is the expectation? How do I comply? So on my segment, I'm going to be focusing primarily, if you're going to plan to do outdoor dining, these are the key critical steps you have to follow in order to be compliant. If you don't, unfortunately, you're going to be, as I mentioned earlier, investing endless amount of resources and time on a product that's not going to be compliant, and potentially you might be asked to take it down or give you a very specific time by the DOT to comply. So we want to make sure that we guide you in the right path, give you the right resources. So complacency and compliance is what you're looking for. Now, winter is coming, ladies and gentlemen. and winter's here. And thankfully for the industry, the restaurant industry, hospitality industry has been a somewhat of a friendly winter. But what happens now as we approach into deeper in December and January, when the temperatures are going to spike, and you do want to utilize your sidewalk eating areas, what do you need to know? What do you need to follow? So we're here, okay? We're going to walk you through how we proceed moving forward. Now, is your business compliant? Are you going to be able to comply with the New York City Department of Building requirements? Bulletin 008, are you going to be able to comply with the FDNY requirements for heating? Are you going to be able to comply with the requirements of the DOT as it pertains to sidewalk and street eating? So we're going to walk you through all three requirements in the hopes that by the time I'm done, either you have some good questions or be able to guide you what potentially might be best for your business. So let's start with, how did this all begin? Remember, Cuomo put us on the phase 2 for the city of New York. Until then, the city of New York was pretty much shut down. There was no idea of potentially when was it or when is it that a restaurant or a bar or a storefront may be able to utilize outdoor seating for your patrons, which is putting a massive stranglehold on the industry. And the industry was suffering. So once we got into, say, phase 2, Cuomo pretty much provided the industry a lifeline. De Blasio pretty much provided the industry a lifeline. That lifeline was known as Executive Order 126, in which in June, started June 18th, signed by the mayor, the city of New York was now able to utilize its sidewalks, and the city was able to utilize its actual street in order to maximize the number of patrons a restaurant can now see on a daily basis. Keeping in mind that to this point, indoor dining was pretty much a no-go in the city of New York. Although Yonkers and Long Island did see the flexibility of having indoor dining, the city of New York, due to the cases we had of COVID, fell severely behind. So this is a direct lifeline in which the mayor says, okay, now you can utilize your seating in front of a restaurant or actual street to make sure that if you're gonna be extending the social distancing to patrons, this is what we expect to do. What does Mayor de Blasio do? He appoints the DOT, since all streets and sidewalks are owned by the New York City DOT, makes the DOT responsible for the establishing the program and enforcement of the program. Now, under this actual law, they also mandate that a DOB inspector, FDNY inspector, if they feel that you're not in compliance with the requirement of how to properly erect and maintain seating in front of your business, any government official may have the authority to start asking for compliance. But the compliance was established by the DOT. And the compliance was very, very simple, ladies and gentlemen. The compliance started by doing the following. The Department of Transportation has a quick application process, in which here I have the link. And if you guys would like the link, if you do want to make sure moving forward, you want to have the flexibility of exercising your outdoor seating, the application is quite simple and very and easy to travel. So you go to the website and you register your business. So you pretty much self-certified. And in the application process, you will tell the city of New York, what is it exactly you're applying for? Do you want to open is it for an open restaurant? Is it for sidewalk only? Is it for both street and sidewalk? Or is it for open streets programming, which is the city of New York and Madison and the city and Arthur Avenue, Bronx have shut down streets, so you could actually maximize those streets. So you participate in this program, you enlist your business, you can list multiple businesses if you want to participate in the open streets program. And now you have the flexibility of using both streets and sidewalks, which is fantastic. It gives you a flexibility that did not exist to this point. Now, what happens? The intent of the executive order is for restaurants to maximize their spacing. What started to happen? As the moment this law came in effect, everyone started kind of figuring out, okay, I could use streets, I could use sidewalks, okay, game, I'm on, let's start building something. But no one really looked at the compliance and no one really looked at the Department of Transportation requirements. And a lot of you guys were lost, did not reference the proper materials. You started hiring contractors who promised you shed and sidewalk venues in a short amount of time because it became one of the hottest ticket items in the city. And as soon as you have something, you want to maximize your space, which is understood. The problem was a lot of your contractors did not know what the details for proper installation were. So you told them, hey, listen, the city said I could use a street and sidewalk, and let's put something together. And everyone's kind of scurried and says, okay, I'm clueless in the process. I just want to utilize the space. Let's get it done. Within that time, okay, by not following the DOT requirements, a lot of us got actually on the wrong end of the scenario. We started having interactions with the Department of Transportation, DOB, and FDNY, and the experience was a negative one. You told me I could use the sidewalk. You told me I could use the street. I'm using the street. I'm using the sidewalk. But guess what? You did not follow the DOT compliance. And it was a basic program, and it was a basic set of rules. As we figured it out, what started happening? We started seeing this subtle uses of spacing, which really not compliant. This right here, ladies and gentlemen, is not what the DOT wanted to see. So in their compliance program, they required that in front of a restaurant or bar, you only use the sidewalk. You kept an open side of 8 feet walkway, and you were only allowed to use 5 feet of the frontage of your business. Granted, you can move to the opposite adjacent properties if you have permission of the adjacent property. But if you notice, we have 2 sets of rows here. The compliance needed to be only 5 feet of usage of frontage of your business. Although it looks subtle, we started putting furniture now on the street. We started minimizing the pedestrian walkway. Now people were getting seriously injured by now having to walk on the bicycle lanes, right? And it became a complete mess. You started utilizing crosswalks as well. So this is what the city of New York decided to do. They started to put literature together. Okay, we want to help you, but you also have to comply. And how did they do that? By letting you know what you needed to do. They told us in detail, in a very specific plan, what is it that a business needs to do in order to conform to the regulations. And here, although it looks simple, we have umbrellas, we have solutions to a problem. And our problem was, my business is struggling, I need to do something about it. But the solutions you guys were investing in were never a viable one, leading you guys to lose more time and losing more money, which is the 2 things we did not want to lose at this time. So what started happening is, oh, here we have some fencing, we have some benches on the street, we have umbrellas. There's really no protection of the customers or the patrons on your actual street. This became a problem. So what happens? DOT gives us the information that we need to keep. DOT gives us the information we need to follow. And the information was quite clear. Okay, you're an open restaurant or you're participating in open streets. What do you want to do? Let us know in the application. Okay, you want to be an open restaurant? This is what you have to comply with. First, we want you to keep in mind that from your front of your seating area, you must maintain a walkway of a minimum 8 feet for pedestrians. Do not obstruct the sidewalk. You can use the frontage of your business, but do not make it wider than 5 feet. Please make sure that you're never going to be putting this on no parking zones or bus stations. At this point, you cannot utilize your street actual seating. If you're going to be using street seating, then you have to comply with the following requirements. Your tables have to maintain at minimum 6 feet of social distancing from one another. You have to also be ADA compliant, which means you have to create a ramp for anyone that is disabled. If you're going to be using the barriers, you must have your high visibility tape on the end so that they can see. Your barrier has to be at minimum, ladies and gentlemen, 30 to 36 inches tall and has to be compliant. And in order to feel compliant, a lot of planters will use, they have to be at minimum 18 inches of thickness. And if you're going to use umbrellas, fantastic, you can use them. Keep in mind that if you have more than 400 square feet, the DOT started telling you, okay, this is what we're looking for. Umbrellas have to be freestanding. There is no modification of furniture applied to New York City streets. And this is very simple. They also require to have 15 feet from your fire hydrants, 8 feet from your walkways. What started happening is, if you follow these rules, that all city regulations left you alone. Now, if you wanted to participate in a street program, in which is a program in which New York City closes down streets, multiple businesses could apply on one application, then the requirements were a bit different. You still need to maintain the 8 feet of clearance path for pedestrians. You're still only going to use 5 feet of frontage space in front of your establishment. but the flexibility became the following, ladies and gentlemen. This open lane here, now you could put multiple stations 6 feet from one another, in which if you kept 15 feet of distance for emergency purposes, you had more flexibility of people that could be established in front of your business. A home run if you had a program in your neighborhood that was open streets. We needed to keep on the other end here in your fire hydrant from business to business on each end of the business, and in total, we needed to keep 15 feet from each business, and in total, you needed to keep 30 feet of actual distance from fire hydrants. You needed to keep an emergency lane that was at minimum 15 feet in width, okay? And all the other requirements apply. Now, the difference here, the DOT does become very specific on the barriers you're using to not allow cars to come in. The advantage here is that you could bring as much furniture you like if you're in compliance, and you didn't have to start building. Most restaurants did, but if you had an open street, you didn't have to start building additional furniture to protect your patrons, which is fantastic. In the application you guys do fill out under the DOT, you have options for both. Okay. Now, for some of you guys that are going to potentially ask me, hey, Leo, I have a fruit stand. Hey, Leo, I want to put some of my, I have clothing. I'm a clothing store. The DOT also did enforce and does actually encourage you guys to do your open storefronts for businesses as well. This is for bars, for restaurants. Open storefronts, it's also another program you guys could participate in, which is ideal. And the requirements become similar to the restaurant protocols that you have to follow. Now, so I know it's a lot of information, it's moving quickly. Here it's a fantastic resource you guys could reference. This is the DOT and exactly what they expect to see. They're in downtown Brooklyn in the Fort Greene area, and they're gonna walk you through exactly what a compliant street and sidewalk eatery should look like.
Hi, I'm Chris, an inspector with the New York City Department of Transportation, here in Park Slope, Brooklyn, in a very hot day, in front of Fonda Restaurant to discuss the open restaurant's seating setup in the roadway. Now, you can take a look at the beautiful setup they have here, and if you'd like to be a part of the open restaurant's experience, what you need to know is there's a few rules we need to follow. Now, the maximum width of a roadway setup needs to be 8 feet. You can't have anything further out from the curb than 8 feet that could possibly obstruct vehicles, or like we have here, on a bike lane. Now, when it comes to the width of the setup, it needs to be a minimum of 18 inches, and it needs to be fully closed and a full U-shaped structure all the way around. Now, this serves as protection for the people dining in the seating area. Now, you can do like they did here and fill the area with soil and put some plants for the beautification of the site. Now, what we need is the build to be 30 to 36 inches high and have reflectors placed at the end so the headlights of a vehicle will bounce off at nighttime for visibility and safety. Now, as far as the dimensions of where you can put this, it does need to be directly in front of your property. We don't want any dining setups to be extended into another area. A few other measurements you need to keep in account would be, if you're near a crosswalk, we need a minimum of 8-foot clearance, and if there's a hydrant somewhere around, you need to clear the hydrant by a minimum of 15 feet.
As far as traffic regulations are concerned, we have no stopping, no standing, and bus stops. You cannot have these setups during active no standing hours, not in front of a bus stop at any time, and not in front of no stopping at any time. You may use the roadway dining if a no parking sign is in front of your business, but remember, you must remove or secure your tables and chairs when not in use.
Now we can discuss what's inside of the open restaurants area. First off, some options that you might have, that you do have, is you can build a platform, which would be flush with the sidewalk and provide ADA accessibility for anyone that needs it. Here at Fonda, they don't have a platform, but what they do have is an ADA ramp. As long as you have an ADA ramp upon request, this is perfectly acceptable. A few other options that you might want to take into account, especially on a hot sunny day like today, would be a tent or an umbrella. Now remember, these things need to be weighed down only. We do not want anyone drilling into the sidewalk or into the roadway to affix these things. That's unacceptable. Another possible addition you could have is lights. You can add lights as long as they're not too blinding. We don't want to affect vehicles in any negative way. Remember, this is only for the safety of the vehicles and the people here eating at the restaurant. Now, if you'd like to be a part of the Open Restaurants program, it's very easy. All you need to do is visit nyc.gov/openrestaurants to self-certify. All the information you need is there and is readily available, along with diagrams and everything that I've stated today.
And it's true, ladies and gentlemen, I did look at the application and it's really easy to follow. All it's asking you is for business name, location, name of the restaurant, and what program you want to partake in. Is it sidewalk? Is it going to be street? What do you plan? Are you doing both? Are you want to also be partaking in open streets? So it's a really, really easy actual procedure. And they are going to be, the DOT is going to be looking at your application. Now, when it comes to guidelines, what does the DOT specify? You have to start reducing your footprint when it comes to snow alerts or potential snowstorms in the city. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, you're never going to be allowed to have active dining, whether it's a snow alert in the city of New York. Right? We need to start looking at how we're going to be heating these areas, and that's going to be the next topic of discussion we're going to be taking on. A lot of people are bringing propane tanks to a street. A lot of people are bringing electrical. Some is compliant, some is not. And we're going to walk you through the procedures as the FDNY does get involved now that we're moving into the winter months. Okay? If more than 12 inches of snow is in the forecast, you have to consolidate your actual footprint. You have to comply with all city requirements, DOT and DOB. And there are going to be things we may be doing or taking on that are going to trigger the requirement of both agencies. Okay. Now, some restaurants and some of the restaurants or bars may have furniture that is pretty much set in place, with way down. That's great. However, if you have tables and chairs, it is the responsibility of the business owner, including all heating components, to be removed from the area and back into your restaurant. Okay. Enclosed structures, such as plastic domes, will be allowed for individual parties, must have added air circulation. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to be enclosing your street in dining, you need to maximize your maximum occupancy is going to be the same as indoor, which is going to be 25%. If you have all three sides open, if you have one side open, 50%. If you have all sides open, then it's going to be based on your location and keeping a minimum 6 feet of distance. Okay? And this is just some of the key guidelines that the DOT wants to enforce as the winter months start approaching. Now we start coming into September, starts to getting chilly. Now we're closer to October. Then everyone says, okay, how about now? We enjoyed this program, we complied. It was fantastic for our business. What happens now? How do we move into the winter months? And this is exactly where de Blasio gives his hospitality business industry a massive lifeline. He goes into stating, look, this worked, let's keep it going. Let's help this industry that it's miserably suffering right now. What do? The city establishes Executive Order 153, in which extends all of your outdoor seating through the whole year to further notice. And it maximizes your flexibility of human comfort by allowing the city restaurants, allowing them to use propane space heaters. Now, what did the city of New York do? Now, in this executive order, the Mayor de Blasio makes the FDNY responsible for compliance of when exactly you need to have a permit for your propane heaters, how you're going to store your propane heaters, okay, where your propane heaters need to be stored, and where you're not going to be able to see propane heaters, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we, in detail, we discuss in a Certificate of Fitness T93 course we offer at the Academy. You have, when it comes to heating, you have some options. You have propane heating, you have electrical heating, and you have pipe natural gas. So as a business, you have an array of options you could utilize depending on the application process you're going to be establishing for your business. If you want to maximize your time, I need to go now. My business is struggling. I need to comply right now. I need to start maximizing my occupancy now. Then you may utilize your propane gas. What's the problem? We've seen these propane heaters everywhere now. Requirements only state that propane heaters, so you could be in compliance, are only allowed on your sidewalk. Propane heaters are never allowed to be on the street. Okay, so think about it. A car, a truck comes into contact with one of these locations, we may have a major issue with human safety on these sidewalks and actual streets. Or you may do electrical. You have an array of options you could explore. Here at the Academy, what we do actually walk you through is if you decide to go with pipe natural gas, we provide a G93 actual course, which we tell you, which is a certificate of fitness required by the FDNY for the supervision of pipe natural gas space heaters. We walk you through the requirement of permits, the certificate of fitness holder, requirement of supervision, logs, we require you inspections. We walk you through all the requirements as a potential business that's going to be utilizing outdoor heating. What is it you need to keep in mind? And we would typically go further and beyond than the typical, okay, this is a G93 course, this is all you got to know. We trying to incorporate into the class all the administrative procedures you need to actually have in your establishment when it comes to certifying with the FDNY, as they also have a source certification process when you want to use heating pertaining to propane gas. Or if you want to use propane heaters, we're going to walk you through the T93 certificate of fitness, in which how is heating going to be done correctly on a New York City sidewalk. Keeping in mind, ladies and gentlemen, there is no propane heating on actual streets. You have to go with electrical. So our courses are going to walk you through the requirements. They're going to walk you through the self-certification process. And most importantly, all your staff that does take the course with us, the objective becomes that we help them pass the FDNY examination when they show up to Metotech and take their computer-based exam. Okay. And I know it's fast moving, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot of moving parts to this. We slow this down in our courses so you have a concrete idea, okay, of moving forward now that we're in the thick of the winter months, how you're going to proceed with your business. I understand you guys may have some questions, and we're here to answer all of them, but questions are going to be done at the end after my colleague David Dietrich takes over. First and foremost, thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. My name is Leo. I'm here to assist you. We typically provide email addresses. Any questions, feel free to send them over, and we're definitely here to assist you in any concern or question you may have.
Awesome. Before David gets started, I just want to put our email address out there. We'll make sure to share it in the chat towards the end, but if you have any questions, if they come up after this meeting, feel free to shoot them over to info at tscta.com, and just put Bronx Chamber webinar in the subject line. We'll make sure to get that over to you guys. We'll get those answers to you.
Hey, thank you, Leo, and once again, welcome and thank you for having us. My name is David Dietrich. I'm the instructor at the TSC Training Academy, and what I wanted to elaborate a little bit more is on how the ventilation and COVID-19 transmission ties in to outdoor and indoor dining. I think there's not enough discussion among employers and also people that go to restaurants about why we're actually doing this, why there's a limitation on how many people, how many customers we can have indoors versus why do we limit the amount of customers that can also, for example, use our outdoors areas, especially if it's enclosed. So I just want to talk a little bit about the science behind it, and then also touch upon the employee safety issues, like, for example, the use of personal protective equipment, so the use of face coverings, gloves and sanitizing as it pertains to also our executive orders. And we understand that it's sometimes difficult to be on track with all the changes. And that's why we also want to encourage you to ask questions. We want to make sure that you get the answers, even if you're behind. Maybe there's a legislation you missed on everything that Leo was discussing, or anything that I may mention in my presentation. So even after we're done with this module, please feel free to reach out to us. So I want to start with just basic overview of COVID-19 transmission, and we're at the stage where people are generally aware on how the transmission occurs. But the main focus for us under hospitality industry is how the virus travels in respiratory droplets. And that's pretty much where our main concern is nowadays. So SARS-CoV-2 is essentially the virus that causes COVID-19, and it's mainly spread from person to person. And those droplets are produced when an infected person may cough or sneeze, but it was also proven that regular breathing, even talking or singing, may create an environment where the hazard is present and could contribute to cluster cases where multiple people in the same area may contract the virus. So it's not only the sneezing, it's not only the coughing, but also regular breathing. And that's why the proper air ventilation in areas where any type of services are provided essentially is really the key. So just to give you an idea what type of droplets or what type of particles we're talking about, and how that relates to some other maybe objects or particles that you may see or deal with on a daily basis. So normally respiratory droplets will have diameter less than 10 microns. And to give you an idea how small of a particle that is, if you take a single hair, as you can see on the image, and you cut it in half and you look under the microscope on the diameter of the hair, diameter of human hair is approximately 50 to 70 microns in size. So now, how does that tie into the size of particles of COVID-19, of CoV-2 aerosols? So the smallest particles are estimated to be even as small as 0.1 micron. So you can see the range of aerosols between 0.125 to 5 microns. And this is where the particle is small enough to reach your lung tissue and eventually potentially affect you in the long term and cause obviously a medical condition. So the size of respiratory droplet is really what our concern is. And then how our ventilation systems are capable of handling the spread of that virus, how our filtration systems are capable of dealing with that size of particles is again a question that is important to address. And so seeing how small these particles are, how normally transmission occurs in areas that are maybe dense, in areas where you see larger groups of people sitting or potentially eating. So normally if we have somebody sneezing or coughing, the particle, the aerosol, is generated by person A, and the virus itself is never just traveling, as a particle by itself. It's within the aerosol. So really the particle of virus is in the aerosol that you sneeze out, cough out, or breathe out. And initially it's generated by, as you can see here, the infected person A. And when that air travels, first person B may receive droplets. And the issue becomes over time, because of how light the aerosol particles are, they start dispersing throughout the space, and the larger particles will settle down, but the smaller particles, again, the ones that are smaller than 10 microns, will start traveling throughout the space and will kind of linger there. And according to the research, that can take hours for those particles before they're actually going to settle down. So during those hours, you may need to think, you have to think of, okay, how many people use the same area, the same space from the actual exposure that came from person A. So at time 2, so after a while, the aerosol is dispersed and many larger particles are deposited on the floor, but person B and C will inhale the small particles that unfortunately may include the virus itself. So one of the main issues with that is very often in older buildings, our ventilation systems are using recirculated air. And simply there's not enough fresh air being provided from outside through the HVAC systems. And it's something I'm going to share in a second, but if the air is recirculated and the filtration system and the unit itself doesn't have a highly efficient filter on it, there's still a high risk of people inside the building or inside that facility or restaurant potentially being affected. So that really means that particles may be suspended in the indoor air for a prolonged period of time. So even one person may affect the entire group. So the indoor quality will be a priority. But at the same time, it shows you why setting up the outdoor area in accordance to the guidance released by the city, is going to be vital, and why they limit the amount of people that are allowed to use the indoor spacing. Obviously, we're looking at 25%, and then outdoor spacing, if it's enclosed, will have the same restriction. Okay, so moving on, and it comes to the ventilation system that you may have within your facility, within your restaurant, within your workplace. Normally, those systems are designed more for comfort, right, to continue supply of fresh outside air. But at the same time, over years, we noticed that the design of ventilation system is focusing more on keeping us from polluted air from outside, okay, and then just kind of use the recirculated air from the inside. And the approach with COVID-19 is actually quite the opposite. So now fresh air became almost our friend, and we want to utilize system that provides as much fresh air as possible. And of course, is that the case? We won't know until we actually evaluate the system that is being used by our building. But generally, we maintain temperature, obviously, in the summer time, winter time, to make sure that people inside that building, inside that area, feel comfortable. We can also use ventilation to resist potential fire explosion hazards or dilute airborne contaminants if you're talking about some kind of lab or industrial environment. So what is critical when it comes to filtering of the air that's being provided to the customers, to the employees? So the first thing to consider would be how many air changes per hour is my unit capable of processing. So the air changes per hour simply means it's a measure of air volume added to or removed from space in 1 hour. And you see the table that we share with you here on the screen, and the typical air change per hour table for restaurants. As you can see, in dining area, it would be 8 to 10. Food staging should be 10 to 12, and so on and so on. But keep in mind, this is typical, not necessarily what your building is equipped with. Okay, and ideally, according to some of the recommendations that were released recently by American Congress of Industrial Hygienists and ASHRA, is that the ideal range of air changes should be between 6 to 12. Right, so that's the goal that we should have, and that's something that we should verify with either the building management or have HVAC technician come in to verify that, to ensure we're within that range. Now, the other important aspect will be to verify that the filter that's being used within our system is actually capable of helping us reduce the risk of spread of COVID-19 particles. And I want to just bring back the size of particle that we discussed before. So if the smallest size of particles were 0.1 of a micron, and here on the table on the left, you see that the filter rating varies in terms of effectiveness. You can see altogether we have 16 different ratings, And pretty much anything between MERV1 and MERV10 does not provide any type of protection from those smallest particles. So particles between 0.3 microns and 1 microns, you have no information, no data on how effective those filters are. And to be honest with you, majority of facilities use filters rated with as MERV 8 to MERV 10. So in other words, when the air is recirculated and you have somebody sneezing and that air starts traveling through the HVAC system, technically the SARS-CoV-2 particles are not being addressed at all. And where does it really start? It starts at MERV 11, 12, and then MERV 13, we are getting 50% or more of a protection from those tiny particles. And of course, with larger particles, you can see that number increases. And ideally, we can say, MERV 15 filter would be, or MERV 16 would be great. But in reality is those filters are usually used by hospital facilities. Like that's where the really need is. Plus, the system has to be able to push the air through that filter, which may not be capable. So the other way of looking at the filters that are available out there may be a little bit easier to grasp instead of just looking at the size of microns. So see here from one of the manufacturers, they would advertise that MERV 6 filter would be good for lint, household dust, pollen. But if you're looking at MERV 13 filter, it protects from all those variety of potential sources of contamination, cough, sneeze, bacteria, viruses. Okay? So now, again, the question is my filter used, okay, that's being used within my restaurant or my workplace within that range? What kind of rating are we using? And it's something that maybe you didn't have to look for before, because it wasn't really something that we had to worry about or something that was required. But at this point, it's since September of this year, all restaurants that are providing indoor dining are required to ensure that they're using filters rated for these MERV 13. You also have HEPA filters, which are high efficiency particulate filters. These are usually very expensive, and normally you would see it with air purifiers. They are very effective because they have ability of filtering 99.97% of particles of size of 0.3 microns and more. And they also technically filter particles that are obviously larger and smaller size. There's more of a science behind it, but generally HEPA filters obviously are desirable and definitely meet those requirements. Okay, so again, the question is my standard building ventilation effective enough to prevent the spread of the virus? Okay, so again, usually your system will utilize approximately 10 to 20% of fresh air, and the MERV filters will be 8 to 10 on the rating chart. Which means that with a standard ventilation system, well, we have to obviously take additional steps to ensure that customers and especially employees that are there full-time, can work safely in those environments. Now, 10 to 20% of fresh air, we can say it's recommended to have 100% of fresh air, but simply the more the better. And 10 to 20% is really very little if you think about, obviously the amount of air that will be recirculated. So in September, Executive Order 202 was released, and since then, all food service establishments in New York City were told that if they're using indoor dining, central air handling systems will have to be equipped with a minimum MERV 13 filters. And of course, if you have a higher rating, that's fine, or industry equivalent or greater filtration. So for example, HEPA. And that must be certified, documented by a certified HVAC technician, professional or company, or ASHRAE certified professional. Not only, us saying, yeah, this should work, let's just add this filter to our HVAC system, because we may not even realize that, the installation is wrong. Maybe we didn't follow manufacturer specs, or maybe our unit is just not capable to push the air through that filter. So what about other alternative ventilation methods? Will this work? So what if we just open the windows? The problem with just opening windows, providing fresher ventilation, there's no way to measure how much filtration we actually get. There's no filtration itself. So even though it may work outdoors, where you're leaving a whole side of your dining area open, indoors it gets complicated because of the configuration of the space and just lack of measurable outcome of that. Now, what about like a window fan? The problem with window fan is normally you have areas around it, so the air that's being blown in, okay, immediately escapes through the holes that are around the fan, just like you see on the picture on the screen. Purifiers, great, not a problem. Purifiers are great as an addition. So if you want to have a purifier next to each table, awesome, but by itself, purifier will not provide the quality of air needed. And the main limitation of purifier is that they design for a specific square footage of area. So now the question is, can we cover the entire square footage that we're utilizing in our facility? And most of the time, you won't be able to do that. Okay, so again, air purifier alone also will not do the trick. Okay, so altogether, the idea is how can we protect the worker, or how we can protect the client. You can see the effective ventilation, okay, as many air changes as possible, source of clean air. On top of it, adding portable air cleaner is great. But the main focus will be to make sure that the same air is not being recirculated throughout the building, throughout the facility, throughout the dining rooms. So a few words about personal protective equipment. Now, if you want to find out also more about some of these ventilation principles, obviously we go in depth during our COVID courses. Here we just want to bring up the issue of why the indoor dining is limited, and we just want to encourage you to look into your ventilation system, figure out the filtration, figure out what's the air changes per hour that the system is utilizing, and if you're renting the space, you just have a right to do that. Okay, you have a right to have that info. So in terms of personal protective equipment, also Executive Order 202. Keep in mind that all staff is required to wear face coverings at all times. And now, if you're in need of face coverings, so in terms of surgical masks being provided, there are free supplies of face coverings provided by Bronx Chambers of Commerce, Bronx Chamber of Commerce, that you can pick up from their location. So this shouldn't really be an issue. It's a matter of getting the supply. But it's up to my employer to make sure that all staff practice hand hygiene and also use bare hand barriers consistent with state and local sanitary codes. But the face coverings is something that I really want to make sure you don't underestimate. And a great example of how the principle of transmission works when we have two people that are wearing face coverings, and you can see an example of somebody who might be the carrier and how that person may affect a healthy person that might be sitting, let's say, across the table. So if they both wear face coverings, obviously the risk of spread is very low. Then if you have both people just having their face exposed, the risk is the highest. At the same time, what's interesting is if you have COVID-19 carrier wearing the mask, the risk of spread is relatively low if it's just the healthy person wearing. And remember, at the end of the day, the purpose of wearing mask and face covering is just to minimize really the chance of exposure. Okay? So just a quick comparison. Okay, you probably heard about surgical mask versus N95 or bandana. So the surgical mask, one-time use, it could help stop viral spread, but just keep in mind these surgical masks are only good for larger particles. And now the N95, which are the deniers National Occupational Safety and Health approved respirators, they are similar to almost as effective as HEPA filters. They can filter up to 95% of particles. They're highly efficient. But right now, we are limiting these to healthcare workers, caregiver, emergency personnel. And of course, bandanas or additional face coverings were also added as recommendations. You know, just because, even though they don't eliminate the problem, they do allow us to limit the chance of transmission. Okay? So now, just keep in mind, surgical mask is really one-time use, and I know that with limited supplies, we're trying our best. But you have to understand that after breathing through that mask all day, the bacteria accumulates. And I remember reading a study that was conducted on a person that was wearing the same surgical mask for a week while commuting to work and back from work. So we're talking about just wearing it for half an hour a day each way. And they found 3 million of different types of bacteria inside that mask after wearing it for a week. Right? So you can actually make it worse by not obviously replacing the equipment if you just continuously using the same one. So all we can do is recommend, you know, do not use it for more than one shift, but at the same time, ideally every couple hours you should be replacing your face covering. So remember how to wear a mask. Wash your hands before you put it on. Put it over your nose and mouth. Secure it under your chin. Don't let any straps hanging. Try to fit it snugly against the side of your face and make sure you can breathe through it. When you take it off, make sure you don't touch the inside of the mask. Make sure you pull the strings behind. Don't touch the contaminated potential surface as well. So a couple don'ts, right? And we see it all the time. We do training, we see people just keeping the mask under their nose. You do realize you're breathing through your nose. And those tiny little droplets we were discussing, guess what? They also come from your nose. So it's not only about you, it's also about us. So if I'm the employee of a restaurant, if I'm working for the restaurant, I want my customer to wear that mask properly because it's also for my protection. Okay? Yeah, and here's another way of tackling that problem. You know, we've seen people doing all these different things. So they have their own styles of wearing a mask. It's not a fashion statement. Okay? It's supposed to help you. It's supposed to protect people around you. And in addition, wearing gloves, is it required or not? There are technically two options here. We're talking about non-food preparation activities. If you're going to be wearing gloves, you have to replace them frequently. And then when switching tasks, also, it's encouraged to change gloves. If you don't wear gloves, you must ensure that all employees frequently wash their hands or sanitize their hands. Okay? So disposable gloves also can be, of course, used, but it depends on the policy. So here, they're giving you two technically options to choose from. But now as an employer, I have to provide you a sanitizing station to make sure that you have ability to wash your hands and sanitize it. And keep in mind, dealing with a lot of customers, that, you know, that requires a lot of movement, that requires dealing with other people, debit cards, okay, tables. So it might be a good idea to just invest in gloves. But again, we understand that supply demand right now is just something that we're battling with. Okay, and as a last note, just a few words about record keeping. If any of you are wondering as an employer, from an employer's perspective, do I have to record COVID-19 cases to OSHA? Am I required to notify Occupational Safety and Health Administration about any of my employees that was ill from COVID-19? It actually depends, and there's a chart, there's a flow chart that will allow you to determine that, and we can have this flow chart available. But in a nutshell, you only have to report COVID-19 work-related illness if it involved hospitalization of employee or unfortunately a fatality. And if it's not work-related, so for example, an employee was exposed to maybe somebody at home, or maybe on public transportation, so there's no proof that it was actually work-related, also it doesn't have to be recorded. But if it is, we are required to report it to OSHA within 24 hours, and then if this was a fatality, we have to report it within 8 hours. So again, a little bit of a flow chart, that would allow you to determine, hey, am I actually falling that criteria? Okay, and on OSHA website, please feel free to look it up. You can report that online. You don't have to send letters. You can call office. You can submit it online. And then, of course, if they have any questions, they will reach back to you. Okay, so before we do Q&A, please keep in mind that as TSC family of companies, we can help you with services that tie into COVID-19. So if you need a written plan for reopening, because maybe you're a bit overwhelmed with all those executive orders and legislations, we can help you with that. We also do screening. We do have our own equipment store. So in terms of face coverings, gloves, respirators, sanitizing products, we're also able to help, as well as training. And Leo mentioned different courses, COVID related, but not only. We do construction safety, general industry safety, OSHA courses. So please visit our website. And you can get familiar with our consulting part. We also have our medtech technicians and fire safety professionals. And as Alberto mentioned before, you can email us with questions or inquiries. Okay, so at this point, I would like to move on and see if there are any questions waiting, if there's anything that we can help you with. So I would give the microphone back to Alberto.
That would be me. So we don't currently have anything in the Q&A section. However, we have gotten some great feedback. Stephen wrote, well presented, effective, and professional training. Thank you for this service. And we've gotten a couple of people saying how great it's been. However, we do not have any other questions besides the link to the recording of this, which we are live on Facebook right now, so you can always play it back and watch us on there. But I will be sending the link to the recording of this to all attendees, and obviously TSC will have that as well.
Do you speak Spanish?
Sashay, if I may, just very quickly, we are actually offering a instructor-led virtual course tomorrow for COVID awareness. It's a general awareness safety seminar. It applies to all industries. So if anyone is interested in signing up or signing up their staff members, please visit our website, tscta.com. And look up under distance learning. You'll see the option under safety seminars. Also, if if you just need a little more information about who this would apply, feel free to give us a call, 718-389-2103. Again, the free course is open to the first 50 registrants. We have a few registrants already, so I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. So please reach out, and someone at our office will be glad to assist and get you signed up.
Okay, great. So if there, and I don't see any questions still, so I guess that brings the presentation, to an ending. Thank you guys, all the attendees, for attending. Again, if you think of any questions, please feel free to email me. It's like my first part of my name, sashay@bronxchamber.org, or to the previous slide before we finished had the TSC info on there as well. Feel free to reach out to any one of us, and we'll do the best to answer your questions. So thank you so much. I hope and wish you all a happy, healthy holidays to you and your family. And again, thank you for joining the Bronx Chamber of Commerce along with TSC. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.